Chapter 5. When Heath and the children had left, Dante asked Malou, "Why does he have a bandage around his head? Did you notice it last night?" "I don't know why, Dante, but he certainly didn't have it yesterday. Maybe we could ask Dr. Sanders, if he's around, what happened, or if there's been some changes in his condition." "Let me get the doctor, or maybe the nurse knows," Dante suggested, turning to the door already and walking out. "Thanks," Malou said, still looking down at her husband. "I'm here, sweetheart, and I've talked to the old Indian. Well, not exactly talked to him, but anyway, I saw him in my dream last night, and he told me we'll need to get you out of here. I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I'm sure I'll find a way." Malou stopped in mid-sentence when she heard the door of the room being pushed open. "Good morning, Mrs. Politano. How are you this morning?" Dr. Sanders asked, stepping close to Malou, while Dante returned to his post at the foot of Dan's bed. "Have you managed to get some sleep?" How typical of a doctor to ask that, Malou thought, before answering. "I'm fine, doctor, thanks. But tell me, why does Dan have a bandage around his head? I'm sure he didn't have it last night." She lifted an inquisitive gaze to the doctor. "Ah, yes, and you're right. We only put a dressing around Mr. Politano's head this morning when, after examining the CT scan closely, we noticed that a small blood vessel in the lining of his skull where he sustained the fracture was leaking a little. So we inserted a small catheter to drain the blood and allow the vessel to close properly." Dr. Sanders looked at Malou, obviously wondering if she understood his explanation. Malou was aghast. "Are you saying that you drained some blood from inside his skull?" "They've drilled in Dan's head!" The thought horrified her. "Yes, Mrs. Politano, we had to put it in order to avoid a blood clot to form around the vessel, which have probably found its way to his brain and eventually burst, causing death." "Oh God," Malou blurted quietly. "But you've closed that vessel, right?" "Yes, we did, Mrs. Politano, and there's no danger of further leakage now, and we should be able to remove the dressing in a couple of days." 2 days, Malou thought. We only have 3 days. "Other than that, your husband is doing fine. He just needs plenty of rest, and I'm sure he'll come out of his coma when his body gets over the shock he sustained during the fall." "Is there anything we can do for him?" Dante asked unexpectedly. "Not at the moment, sir, but what usually helps a patient come out of a coma is a quiet chatting to get his brain tuned to the sound of a voice rather than hearing the droning of the medical equipment beside his bed." "And that awful beeping," Malou added. "It could drive anyone crazy." Dr. Sanders smiled. "Yes, that's unfortunately something we can't turn off, but we can certainly tune it down." Joining words to actions, the doctor rounded the bed, went to the heart monitor and turned a knob until the beeping was down to a mere rhythmic chirp. "Thank you," Malou said, exhaling a sigh of relief. "That's much better." "Okay, folks, if you'll excuse me, I have to see to my other patients, but if you have any other concerns, just have the nurses page me, okay?" "Thanks, doctor," Malou replied, watching the man exit Dan's room. "Do you think I could have a few more minutes alone with him?" she asked Dante then. "Sure, I'll get a soda from the machine down the hall," Dante replied. "Do you want something?" "No, not for me, thanks. I'll come out when I'm ready to go home, okay?" "No worries, Malou. Take your time. I'll be in the waiting room if you need me." And with these words, Dante left the room quietly. As soon as the door had closed on him, Malou took her husband's hand in hers and kissed it. "I am so sorry, Dan. I want you to know I should have found something else for us to do instead of you going skiing. I just didn't want to change the future, but now, I don't know. The only thing I can do for us and the children is to get you out of here safely and back to Pahokee. How I'm going to do that, I don't really know. But the old Indian said that I should have faith in what I can do for good, so that's what I'm going to do. Have faith." Then, after looking around her and through the glass window giving onto the nurse's station to see if anyone was watching, she pulled the piece of lace that she had found clasped in her hand that morning and that she had brought back from Pahokee the previous night, out of her jacket pocket. Once she stretched it between her hands, she looked at it and smiled at the recollection of Dan mentioning that a dream catcher looked like a spider web. The doily indeed resembled a very fine web with a tiny hole in the middle. Again, not wanting to attract undue attention, Malou looked around her and then lowered the blanket from over her husband's chest. She needed to place the web against the skin, not over his hospital gown. She caught her breath when she noticed the bruising over Dan's ribcage. "Oh God, that must hurt like hell," she thought, and she was also surprised to see that there was no bandages around his torso. Don't they wrap a stretch bandage around the chest when you've got cracked ribs? But she shrugged the thought away for the moment. Trying her best not to disturb his shoulder sling and bandage, she inserted the woven web in between the garment and Dan's skin, making sure his new dream catcher lay over his heart properly. "It will protect you from evil entering your heart and mind, sweetheart," Malou then told Dan. but nobody can see it, otherwise it won't work. Satisfied that the web was well hidden now, she replaced the sheet and covers over her husband's chest and sat down in the chair beside his bed. A few moments later, while listening to the chirping machine, Malou touched her amulet distractedly and then heard Dan's voice. She turned her head in a jerk towards his bed, thinking he had woken, but no, he was still immobile with his eyes closed. I must be hearing things now, she thought, yet the voice came back to her mind quite audibly then. They wash me in the morning, it said. Not wanting to question what she still thought was a trick her mind was playing on her, Malou looked at her husband in disbelief, but then peered down to her dream catcher and touched it before she asked, "Did you say something, sweetheart?" "They wash me in the morning," Dan repeated. "Oh God, you're talking to me," Malou burst out louder than she expected. Thank you. But what does that mean?" Dan's voice didn't come back with an answer to Malou's dismay. Her head bowed and remaining silent, she wondered what Dan meant. Then it came to her. If they gave him a sponge bath every morning, the nurses would see the dream catcher, the laced web that she had just inserted underneath his gown. She put her hand to her mouth and looked at her husband. How was she going to prevent anyone from undressing him? It took her a couple of minutes to figure this out, but once she had found an answer, Malou rushed out of the room and went to talk to the nurse. "I'm sorry," she said, bending over the counter, "but have you given my husband a sponge bath already this morning?" Looking up from her computer screen, the matronly-looking woman said, "Yes, we did, Mrs. Politano. Is there something wrong?" No, nothing's wrong, but would you mind if I did it tomorrow morning?" Another weird one, the other nurse thought. She had seen all kinds, but had not yet encountered a woman wanting to wash her husband. "If you come in around 7 a.m. tomorrow, I guess that would be okay." She looked at Malou curiously. "But may I ask why you want to do that?" "Yes, well," Malou said, visibly embarrassed, "it's just that I think he would like it." She threw a pleading glance to the nurse. "All right, I guess having your husband in a coma like this is not easy, is it?" "No, it's not, and thanks for letting me do it. I'll be here at 7 tomorrow," Malou said, turning on her heels to return to Dan's room. But then she had another thought, and retracted her steps to the counter. "Sorry to bother you again," she said, "but could you tell me why my husband has no bandages around his chest? He has broken ribs, hasn't he?" "Yes, he does, Mrs. Politano, but we don't wrap the rib cage unless the patient is mobile. As soon as he wakes up and he is able to sit up, we'll get him a stretch bandage then," the nurse answered. "Thank you. That's all I wanted to know. I'll see you tomorrow then," Malou added, stepping away from the counter and walking to her husband's room quietly. Incredulity still lacing her thoughts, she said, "Okay, sweetheart. I've asked them to let me give you a sponge bath tomorrow, so I'll be back at 7 a.m. Don't you worry, okay?" she added, taking his hand in hers once more. As soon as she was seated in the chair again, Malou thought she heard Dan say, "Thank you," but couldn't be sure. His voice was very faint. On the way home, sitting in the passenger seat of Dante's car, Malou turned her face to him. "I know you're going to work tomorrow, but would it be okay for you to drop me off at the hospital on your way there?" "Sure, but don't you want to take your car? I mean, how would you come back?" "I could do that, but I'm not sure I want to drive just yet. I'm thinking of Dan all the time, and I don't think I could concentrate through the Monday morning traffic." "Not a problem, Malou, and if you want, I could drop by the hospital around lunchtime to pick you up." "No, Dante, no need. I'll catch a cab when I want to get back. I'm sure some of the guys would want to come by for a visit." Dante nodded. "Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me that as soon as Ernesto hears about what happened, he'll be the first to come in with balloons and get well presents. You know him, he can't stop joking around." Malou had to laugh at the thought of seeing Dan's room populated with balloons and flowers and boxes of chocolates, not to mention pizzas, and Ernesto making jokes for everyone to hear. "Yeah, that's all Dan needs, Ernesto and balloons," she quipped. Dante chuckled for a bit and then said, "We've got a surprise for you at home." Malou, stunned-faced, turned to their friend again. "What kind of a surprise? You know Raphael and Lisa are coming." "That's just it," Dante said. "When I was waiting for you, I phoned Raphael, and Lisa got on the line, and she told me not to worry about lunch, and that she'll take care of it." "You mean she's cooking in my kitchen?" Dante chuckled. He knew that Malou's kitchen was absolutely off-limits to anyone. "No. She said she'll bring lunch with her when they come over." He threw Malou a quick glance. "I guess that's okay then. At what time did she say they'll be coming?" "Around 1 o'clock. Just time for us to get home and relax before they arrive."